port. The longshoremen are there, but that's because we've got a port authority and we sort of go around and pretend that this is not really public and so forth. So Virginia is in better shape here than most states, but there, in California in particular, 5 or 6 years from now, there's going to be a real thrashing around as they find themselves less and less able to fund the public pension stuff that they're spending. Of course, in Illinois, it's already happening. They just can't do it all. Light rail. 300 million for 3 miles. Well, you know, I'm not a great fan of light rail. When I was in graduate school and got out of graduate school, I was working in Chicago at the Harris Bank. I didn't have a car, I rode the L. But it connected large groups of people. The key to a viable tide in Hampton Roads is that it goes where the people are, or where the people want to go. And that would almost clearly include the naval base. It would probably include Old Dominion University, maybe the airport. The current extension that's being talked about, going to the town center or whatever, is, I'll use a mathematical term, sort of the second order of smalls. It's not going to make much difference. But if we wanted to invest a really lot of money, we could go to Greenbrier, we could go across the water, and if we went across the water east and north, and could do it in a way that just didn't absolutely break the bank, there would be lots of people who would take that rather than go through the tunnels. But right now, the reduction in congestion due to the tide is virtually zero, and it will be close to zero even when it goes to town center. It has to go lots of other places in order for this to be viable, but that's going to be very expensive. Now, if we do extend the tide all these places, probably 2040 or 2050 we'll be pleased we did, but we shouldn't kid ourselves that it's going to make a huge difference in congestion for some period of time until we've actually gotten to these places where the people are. Final quibble I have about the tide is that everybody's paying for it, but only certain people are benefiting. First of all, the people who ride, and then the people who own the properties right around the extensions. It's a very unequal distribution of costs and benefits. I have some problem with that. There are ways you could get at that in terms of taxation and so forth, but it's a complicated thing. But, you know, again, I'm a fan of public transport. I probably, it's not as glamorous, but I'd probably prefer that we went the bus route in Hampton Roads. Actually, they pollute less than most people think, and whenever I'm in places like London, there's this bus stop and the screen comes up and tells you when the next bus is coming, and I wish we had something like that. I think that makes sense. The final point I'll make before I get off of this, we have a reason to want good public transportation that is related to that labor force participation right. One of the reasons why some of these people can't get to jobs is they can't afford to get there, or it's too expensive for them to get there. Public transportation is a poverty reduction strategy, not foolproof, and that doesn't justify it by itself, but it is related to that. It has some social aspects to it that I think are useful. Progress concerning manufacturing in Virginia. I wish I had brought that slide along, but I have a slide that shows since 2000, manufacturing output, the real value after you've taken out price inflation, has gone up 21%. but the number of manufacturing employees has gone down 16%. Fewer people are producing more stuff. We're producing more manufacturing goods now in the United States than ever in our history. But we're doing it with many fewer people. A couple of years ago, I did a book on Caterpillar, you know, the tractor company. You go into a Caterpillar plant in East Peoria, Illinois, and there aren't many people on the floor at all. They're all up above in these air-conditioned slots, and they're looking down and they're doing computer sorts of things, and they're running robots and machines and so forth. They're all getting paid well, except there aren't as many of them, not nearly as many. The UAW 974, the United Auto Workers, when I was growing up in that region, in Peoria, they were huge. When they went on strike, I used to deliver the Peoria Journal-Star, the newspaper. I had no papers to deliver because the workers said, I can't afford it anymore, no newspapers. And when they went on vacation, they all went on vacation for the same 2-week time, I had no papers to deliver then either. And the Little League stopped because there were no players. They were big stuff, well, not anymore. I went to visit the UAW 974, and they've been completely disciplined. First of all, their membership is about 25% of what it used to, and they also understand that Caterpillar can easily go, as they have, to the south to work, right-to-work states, where there are no unions. Caterpillar says it doesn't have a southern strategy, but it does. Well, folks, this isn't going to change. These technological changes, the automation, the substitution of machines for people will continue to occur. And for the most part, in the long term, that's a good thing for us. Do you remember when you were young, you used to talk about ice boxes? Yeah. That's because some guy came by, some gal, and they delivered ice. Well, there aren't any ice boxes anymore, and there's nobody anymore delivering the ice. But that's a good thing, isn't it? Those people lost their jobs, but that's the nature of progress and of capitalism. And what we have to do socially, or as a society, is when people lose their jobs, is try to figure out how to slot them into something new. One of the reasons those labor force participation rates are going down is because of this technological change. Somebody loses their job and they're not qualified to do anything else. Well, we have to work on that. And our educational system and the like are very important parts of that in terms of retraining people and slotting them in. There is more manufacturing going on now in Virginia than ever before, but with fewer people. And they're going to be probably in the future even fewer people. And there's nothing we can do to stop that. What about eliminating corporate income taxes in Virginia? Well, the economic evidence is that for the most part, corporations do not pay taxes in the sense of they're able to shift the tax. And they shift it to consumers in terms of higher prices and so forth. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing the corporate income tax go away, but politically, that's one of these things that is not going to happen. I mean, I don't think it's hardly worth talking about because it doesn't have any political wheels to occur. But corporations are able to shift that tax rather effectively. The evidence indicates they can shift 80 to 90% of it typically. And so they're not really paying it, it's consumers who are paying it, and so why don't we sort of just own up that that's the way it is. But there would be deep yogurt attached to any political candidate who really advocated that strongly.
But on that subject,
Yeah.
We're at 35% on taxes, I think, on large manufacturers, so they're going overseas. Don't you think if we brought that way down, that those companies would
I think at the federal
stay,
level,
but others would come here?
I think at the federal level that can be done pretty easily, and I think probably there will be some adjustment there because we're seeing these companies leave because at the margin we're taxing them in a different fashion, and so they end up going to Ireland or someplace. And you know, we can accuse them of being communists for that or whatever, but that's a natural result of capitalism. So, yeah, I think we can change the rates. What about the minimum wage? Well, most economists, I would say 90%, do not think an increase in the minimum wage is a good idea. They would prefer the earned income tax credit as a way to handle poverty. And the earned income tax credit, you file your income tax return, if you're working, it adds a payment to you. And it gradually phases out as your income goes up. But this is preferable because it does not raise somebody's wage rate so that an employer says, you're now too expensive, I'm not going to hire you. It doesn't cost the employer anything. Okay? So the employer has no disincentive not to hire. But the employee has an incentive to work more. The more they work, the more they get. The minimum wage, though, going up to like $15 an hour, is essentially a tax on employers. And they will react as employers would react to any tax. Ask somebody who's in favor of raising the minimum wage if they think putting a higher tax on sugary drinks will work. And generally they'll say, yeah, I think people won't drink as much. And there's evidence that's true. Well, if that tax reduces demand for a product, why wouldn't a tax on labor reduce the demand there? Well, it will. So we have to, I wouldn't say have to, but I would like personally to take care of individuals who are at the lower end of the spectrum, and the earned income tax credit is a better way to do it because we're rewarding people who are working and we're not penalizing employers. Yes?
Well, two things there. One, the problem with the earned tax credit and the social programs we have is that it provides a disincentive to improve your own situation. I have tax clients who have actually screamed at me because they actually made enough money where at tax time instead of getting the big check, they get a little check and said, it's not worth my time, why? Because, you know, why is this happening to me?
Yeah, but
it's because you made $35,000 this year.
What you're saying is they don't need it. They don't need it, they don't need it.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, okay.
But if you have a choice of earning $35,000 and not getting the goodies, or working part-time getting $15,000 and it's ending up to $35,000, which one are you going to do?
Well, but it phases out. The way the earned income tax credit works, and if you're in that business, you know, is the rate changes over time, and so it remains profitable for you to continue to work. And, you know, I certainly look at evidence that you have that people are behaving otherwise, but at least the rate structure is such that it's always profitable for you to work a little bit more because you make yourself go up.
Yeah, I have one client who works for a company that is seasonal. It works during the school year. And she says, I'm going to go on to unemployment during the summer because it keeps my overall income where I can get a big paycheck. And so you're incentivizing her to sit on her butt for 3 months of the year because that's better tax policy for her.
There may be some cases like that. You know, I guess I would argue that compared to raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, those are sort of small problems.
And the other one is $24 billion fraud in the EITC.
And I did that one. Why is it more acceptable for people not to work? I don't know. Except that apparently it's now more socially acceptable for people to be on street corners or at home or not doing something.
On that issue, it seems to me when Clinton was president, he limited the number of months or time that you could be in unemployment compensation,
Yeah.
which was working. People would go out, there were more people got jobs because of it. Now Obama's removed it, you can be on it forever from what I understand. So
Well,
people
not
just-
forever, but it's longer.
But I mean, basically, which was a terrible mistake in my opinion. That's a political sort of question, I know, but
The world is full of sort of economic incentives and disincentives. It's a disincentive to work if you extend the unemployment compensation eligibility time period by a year or something. I have another slide I can show you. When somebody's unemployment compensation gets in like the last month or so, the proportion of people who go out and find a job goes up pretty significantly,
Yes.
which is what you would predict. But you also have to say, well, you know, in really tough economic conditions, do we want to try to take care of some of these people? Because one way or another, society's going to end up paying for them. And so what's the best way to do it? That's a kind of a tough thing to get at, but let's see. Somebody's asking a question about port depth that I can't quite understand, so ask now.
Well, we're at 50 feet.
Yeah, yeah.
And you talked about that subject. My question is, how important is it to lower it? And compared to the other areas you talk about, New York and Savannah, where are they in that area?
They're not anywhere near 50 feet, but after the Bayonne Bridge is completed, they'll be able to handle the biggest ships. Savannah's not there, but the state of Georgia is spending quite a bit of money to try to get them to that point. The real prize out here are these big ships that are being constructed, some of which are already on afloat that handle 20,000 TEUs. They're huge and they require a lot of depth.
And don't they make them wider to catch?
They're also wider, yes.
So they don't have to have.
And those ships are too wide to get through the Panama Canal, for example. They just don't fit. But we don't have that width problem here. That's a real advantage for us. But we have to, if we want to sort of stay in the game, we have to increase our depth. But that's expensive.
Isn't one of the limitations on that the tunnels? I think 54 feet, if I remember from my Navy days. It's
Yeah, right now it is, yeah. I mean, if we want to go really big time, if we were talking about 60 or something, the current tunnel structure does
You
not
rebuilt the
permit
tunnels.
that. We'd have to really spend a lot of money then.
Yeah.
Anything else that, for the good of this
The question
nation?
I sort of asked, but in terms of spending these billions or trillions of dollars on tide and whatever, the major biggest problem we have, as far as I can see, is good old Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. And there's been talk about spending these monies and putting a third tube, which could be alternated between, you know, what's your feelings along those lines? Or maybe I haven't asked the
Well,
question.
right, yeah. Right now, the cost of a third tube on the bridge tunnel or the Monitor Merrimack or the Patrick Henry going across there, those are far more expensive than extending the tide.
Well, it's going more than the 300 million,
Yeah,
yeah, but
I mean-
with what they're talking about that they want to do.
Okay, now, would those do more good than extending the tide? Yes, if we could afford them. But right now, our revenue stream from the dedicated sales tax and so forth is not even remotely large enough to handle all the things that we say we need to do. Which, you know, the high-rise bridge, I-64 widening, the Patrick Henry, all this stuff, we can't even remotely afford it. So if we want to do this stuff, and if, for example, we wanted to extend the tide to where the people actually are, we have to tax ourselves more. That's what it comes down to. We just don't have the revenue. And so since I don't think we're likely to tax ourselves that much more, we have to make some pretty tough decisions about what it is that we want to do. And the city of Virginia Beach is part of that, but only part of it. We need a regional solution to these kinds of things because almost 65% of all the people who go to work every day in Hampton Roads cross a city or county line to go to their job. It may be true that the locally elected officials only get votes from where they're elected from, but people behave differently. In fact, I will just say, I was talking to a Virginia Beach council person, who I won't name, and he or